3, 2, 1.
Roll red, upright track red.
Turns and shoots. He scores!
Take that silver. Take that feed.
Mike check 4. Number 2 RL.
Take 3.
Ready,
Number 4,
A.
stay with the defender. 30 blue.
Ready, A, Dan.
4.
Way back to the wall, out the ball. That ball is out of here. Oh, sucker!
Have a good one, everybody.
Shooting to Score is brought to you by Hall Pass Media and Hall Pass Studios. Hall Pass Media is a full-service marketing agency that specializes in brand consulting, event management, digital marketing, and creative design. Hall Pass Media has a wide range of clients and partners that include the NBA Summer League, the NBA Coaches Association, and the basketball tournament. For more information, please visit hallpassnetwork.com. This episode is also brought to you by Sports Business Classroom, an immersive sports business training and educational experience unlike any other. Registration for this program is now open. The experience is a one-of-a-kind learning opportunity for anyone interested in the sports industry, specifically the business of basketball. For media professionals, this is a unique opportunity to enhance your sports business intellect and network with some of the brightest minds in the field. If you dream of one day landing a job in sports or wish to advance in your career, this program will allow you to show the right people that you have what it takes. Sports Business Classroom combines the best of all worlds into a single package. It's great academics, it's hands-on experience, and immersion at the Las Vegas Summer League. You can check out all the details for the 2020 program at sportsbusinessclassroom.com. And if you're at all interested, make sure to apply as soon as possible as this program will fill up. Again, the URL is www.sportsbusinessclassroom.com. If you've ever turned on SportsCenter, you've seen his work. Philipp Bichsel is an award-winning motion designer with a specialty in sports projects. The Swiss-born creative came to the U.S. to study broadcast design and motion graphics and has been making a name for himself ever since. Whether it's MLB on ESPN, NBA Finals, Monday Night Football, or the World Cup, Philipp's expertise and work has been seen on screens around the world. Our conversation was riveting, with Philipp shedding light on tons of different aspects of the motion design world, especially as it pertains to sports. He painted a picture of what a career path would look like for someone looking to break into that field and gave tons of tangible advice about how to thrive in it. This was a very cool interview for me, as I only have a basic understanding of graphic design, but can definitely appreciate the value it brings to sports video production. And as if the epic visuals that Philipp creates weren't enough, his enthusiasm when he's talking about his craft is eminently admirable. Thanks for joining me today, Phil. Really excited to get into this with you. How you doing today?
Doing great, hanging in there. It's been an interesting time, but staying busy on projects, luckily, and just taking it day by day.
Cool. Well, interested to jump into things with you. You obviously have an interesting story as you live here in the States, but you're not from here, from what I understand. Right. Can you talk about how you ended up here, where you're from, and then how'd you get into video production in particular?
Yeah, so I grew up in Zurich, Switzerland, far away from LA. And I lived there for the first 18 years of my life, and then decided to study in the United States and went to SCAD in Savannah, Georgia, and studied motion graphics and broadcast design. Did that for 4 years, and actually enrolled in graphic design first, and then one of my student advisors, she kind of geared me towards the motion graphics side, and it's something I honestly didn't really know about until she showed it to me, and then I was like, oh, this is cool. This is basically like, graphic design, but it's all in motion, and kind of mixes in that animation component and compositing. And she showed me some examples of SportsCenter graphics packages, and I was always big on sports TV, so I was obviously hooked on it. And didn't really look back from that point on. And then I was there for 4 years, and then after that, 2009. I moved to New York City, got a full-time job there as a designer animator at a place called Big Star. And it was a crazy first year, just kind of like jumping into the cold water. But it was a small company, but they gave me a lot of responsibilities early on. And some days were really tough, and then other days were really fun. And, at that point in your early 20s, you're just kind of, sleep doesn't matter to you, not as much. And it was just a constant grind, after coming home from work, I would, try to find new like tutorials. That was like right around that time when tutorials became big online. Whereas before there was only like a couple resources. So it just became like a huge passion of mine, the whole thing, and I just wanted to get better at it. Saw a lot of cool stuff on TV. Saw a lot of fun projects friends of mine were working on, and there's always a bit of a sense of competition. It's friendly competition for sure, but and you obviously you chat with all your friends and you try to pick their brains about how they came up with a certain look or a style, a certain technique. So and then from that point on, I was there for about a year at that company, and then I decided to freelance for another year. At that time, my visa still allowed me to kind of shop around and work at other companies. So I took that opportunity, and then the following year I had to go back to a full-time position due to my new visa. And I've been always kind of battling the whole visa game, which is fair, but it just comes with the with being international, I guess. And I was lucky enough to get a full-time position. Was back in New York again for maybe a year or so, and then one day I got a call from a company in LA called Troika, and they specialize in TV and branding. They do a lot of sports work. They actually have a full sports division. Longtime partners with ESPN, Golf Channel, and all the likes, and they were always like a big sort of company I wanted to work for. It was always a goal of mine, and it was just kind of meant to be, I guess. And they had 2 guys in town for a meeting or a pitch of some sort, and they hit me up and they're like, "Do you want to meet up in the morning for breakfast over coffee and just chat?" And so we did the following day, and then we just kind of hit it off. And it was like 2 weeks later, I think I packed my bags. Drove cross country in a van. It was awesome. It was a long drive, but
the American dream right there.
Yeah. It's crazy. I actually did it twice before for my internship, which was my junior year. Sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around, but
no worries.
I did Savannah, LA, and back within like 3 months. So I kind of knew what I was getting into, but it was fun taking a different route the third time. And I started at Troika. I was there as a designer animator, and then it was definitely different from the company I was at in New York. This was a full blown like creative agency, and they had their ways of doing stuff. They had their formulas, and a lot of the creative directors they were known for a specific style that obviously the clients really reacted well to, and it was a much bigger production team. But I started out working on one of the SportsCenter rebrands, and that was huge. Very intimidating at first because I was still kind of learning my ways with like 3D, and it was just a constant like learning process. But again, very challenging at first, but then you get into the groove of things, and it was a super rewarding time. I was there for almost 2 years, and then I went on to go to Big Block. I was there as an art director, and kind of continued the whole ESPN streak with all the football projects, Monday Night Football. We did a Sunday NFL Countdown, and just kind of developed that relationship with ESPN and all the guys that worked there. And they became great friends, and I think we worked together for almost 5 years. It was just kind of one project leading into the next. We did NBA Finals, and I think it was 2017. We did the regular season package as well. It was awesome, and 5 years just kind of blew by like it was nothing. But right now I've been freelancing, working with multiple shops, doing some direct to client work. Now I'm kind of getting fortunate by getting hit up by clients that used to work with some of those studios, and now they just approached me directly, which was awesome. Cool. And then I'm here to like facilitate and find some sort of creative team that I can put together, and it's usually a bunch of my friends and people from my network, and
nice.
It's kind of a new way of doing things. And now with this whole pandemic going on, it's kind of how things roll. So
right,
it's crazy. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I mean, I love the kind of career, the lifetime little story journey there, and a bunch of parts that I want to dig into and find out and learn more about. But first, I mean, of all your career, kind of, somewhat short career to this point, do you have a favorite project or a most memorable project that you've worked on so far?
Yeah. I think they're all memorable in their own way. Some for better reasons than others, but gosh, man, you put me on the spot because some of these people watch this or
okay, what's the coolest experience you've had in your career? I'll put it that way.
Coolest experience was probably it was probably going to ESPN. We pitched a job up there for their college basketball project a few years ago, and they gave us a full tour of all the studios. And again, this is all like stuff I've been watching on TV for many years, and it was just awesome to get the whole like behind the scenes look and treatment. And they showed us around the NFL studio, and they put a ton of effort and detail into that new studio from a couple of years ago now. And it was just cool seeing your work that's usually lives on the TV somewhere. It was cool to see it in a physical space like a studio.
Right.
It's being used on all the monitors, all the backgrounds, even like the staircase had like all the logos on it, and it was crazy. So that was definitely fun. As far as like favorite projects go, I would say NBA Finals was extremely tricky time-wise, because it was basically a facelift of the regular season package that we've done, and they basically wanted to go more like black and gold and make it super primetime, high end, but using the same sort of like motion theories, and so it was a good starting point, but it got tricky as like the project went on, because we didn't know what teams are going to be in the finals, and they pretty much cut it all the way up to like a few weeks before. That was like the deadline of the project. So we kind of had to guess, like, okay, these teams are still in the running. They're looking pretty good. Obviously, this is during like Warriors and Cleveland heydays. So we ended up going with those two teams, as well as like 3 or 4 other ones that we rendered out. So we basically over-delivered, but we had to, because we had to like cover our bases. It made it challenging time-wise, but I think just the team, a lot of times it comes down to like the team we can get together, all the freelancers. Sometimes you just have that right combo, and it's a great vibe in all the meetings. And, some people are, 7 days, 8, 9 days without sleep, but they still show up, and, everyone still has a great time. So it makes it a lot easier when the group morale is up and people actually want to work on this stuff. I've been on projects where I'm super into it, but then somebody else is not, and it's really tough to like keep them motivated, especially over these like long production times. That was fun, and obviously NBA Finals. It was just one of these things I always wanted to work on, and been a huge basketball fan all my life. It was awesome. Obviously, watching that whole series. I think they only went. I forgot. They only went 5 games, maybe. So obviously we wanted it to go to like Game 7, but it's crazy doing the full graphics package for like 5 games. It's nuts. That was cool. It's probably one of my favorites.
So I'm curious about that, though. I mean, growing up in Switzerland, where does your passion for sports come from, and particularly American sports?
Yeah, so in like the late 90s, that was the first, I think it was 96, during summer break, we took a family vacation. I went to Florida, and I think it was Orlando, and then we went to Vegas. So that was my first like image of the United States. I was like, okay, so it's Disney World and like
Vegas
and like crazy hotels and roller coasters and all that. But yeah, I don't know, something like definitely stuck in my head. I think it was also like watching all the American movies in Switzerland. Obviously, they were like dubbed in German, but you know, all the obviously the actors are the same, and you know, you see all the American cars, and I don't know. I was always like super interested in the States, and I guess I told that to my mom. Told me this recently. I told her pretty early on that I wanted to like move to the States at some point to like study, and so yeah, we came over here a few more times on vacation, and it just kind of became like our destination for the whole family, and from that point on. My last like 2 years in high school, I actually switched schools. So in Switzerland, they had all these like international schools where you could like learn English and all that. So I took the last 3 years of high school. I took everything in English, so like mathematics and biology, which to you guys is normal, but to me it was like so insane going from like 1 year everything's in German, and then the next year everything's in English. So kind of forced to like learn the language, and yeah, and then that's when I went off to college. It's kind of how it ended up. But yeah, like I said, like sports wise, I played a lot of sports in high school. Played basketball, played some hockey, played soccer, and yeah, it was just every time we came over here on vacation, sometimes we catch a Laker game, and some of these experiences definitely. Stuck in my mind, and I just wanted to go back over and over and over again and see these like, you know, larger than life people in person. And it was just something that you don't really see in in Europe. In Europe, the biggest thing is soccer and hockey. So that's kind of what I grew up with. But it's just such a much bigger show and production here in the United States. It's not even close.
Right.
Yeah. So I was always intrigued by the whole sports industry. Yeah.
Were you set on going into that industry coming out of college, or did that just was that happenstance that it worked out that way?
I mean, coming out of college, it was a tough time too. It was 2009, and there weren't exactly a lot of jobs. And yeah, I mean, me and all my buddies, I mean, we were just like blind emailing studios. We're like, the first one that gets back to us, this is where we're headed, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I did the same thing. And I think when you come out of college, a lot of times you're interested in a lot of things still. You're still trying to figure out your ways.
Totally.
And, you know, what you're into and all that. I always had like the sports thing in my head as something I wanted to pursue. But I knew at the beginning I wasn't really gonna have the luxury of like picking like, hey, I want to be in this project, I want to be in that project, because a lot of times these studios, they you know, if a junior guy comes in, they'll most likely put you on anything. I mean, it's not in your power. And so actually, I early on I got to work on a lot of like documentary films, and again, like things I never thought I was gonna do ever. And then, you know, the occasional sports project would come around. It would be like a promo thing for Fox, and yeah, it just felt different every time I had a sports project on my desk. I was like, oh, finally, like this is awesome. Yeah, I think it just comes down to whatever passion you have. But yeah, no, certainly I didn't pick the sports industry coming out of college, but I knew I was going to work my way towards it at some point. I just didn't know how soon that was going to be, and a lot of it comes down to patience too. You're just you can't rush into things. A lot of stuff happens for a reason too. I'm a believer in that. You know, a lot of it is timing, being in the right place, right time. Yeah, it's just kind of how it's for me. Yeah,
I'm always interested in that question, because it seems like everyone's answer is a little bit different. You know, a lot of people like myself, you know, got into the video and the production side just because we knew we weren't going to be professional athletes and still wanted to be around the game. So we're using this medium to get us there. Whereas you just, you know, wanted to do the graphic motion design and stuff like that, and happened to find your way into it, and you enjoyed it. So so it's cool to hear different people's paths and what's triggered them into the path.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think motion graphics itself is a very like niche industry.
Oh, totally.
It certainly has gotten bigger over the last like 10 years I've been doing it or whatever. So you have motion graphics, which is niche, and then you go sports motion graphics, which is like a subsegment of that. So it's wild. I don't know who can really, I think now you can probably plan earlier to get into that sort of field, but back then it wasn't. I don't know of anyone that said like, hey, this is what I'm. There was one guy that did like, he did a lot of film titles and he ended up doing that. Again, it's tough. I think once you have your goals in mind, like you just got to go get them. A lot of hard work and, meet the right people.
Right.
A lot of it is your network too, for sure.
So what kind of stuff in school were you learning? What type of programs were you working on? And I would imagine when you were graduating, you had a reel or some samples that you could use to send to studios to apply for jobs, correct?
Yes. The reel was a big thing. This is still in the DVD days. And we actually had a full studio class in our last quarter where they taught us how to, design our own packaging and how we should like present ourselves to these companies, which was interesting because we all paid a lot of money for all these fancy cases and like who had the better DVD case. And it was just it was a funny like competition. And then later on, once we got into the industry, we saw what happens with all these DVDs that get sent to these studios. And it's just like heartbreaking because how much time and effort went into all these things. And a lot of times, the big studios especially, they get tons of these every day, and they don't know what to do with them, right? The reel was obviously essential. I learned everything in After Effects first. It was all 2D animation. And learned how to composite in After Effects as well. Did some classes in Shake, which I never heard of that product again, but I don't know if anybody's using it. And then I never took any 3D classes. That was the one thing at SCAT. All the 3D animation classes were in a different department, and a lot of the motion graphics people and animation crew, they didn't really like intermingle too much, even though it was the same building. But for me it was all After Effects and then all the Adobe stuff, Photoshop, Illustrator. Took a lot of like typography classes. Definitely graphic design was always like the foundation. Totally. And it was very important to know all the fundamentals of like good kerning and which typefaces work and why, and all these like deeper meanings. But I sort of like classically trained, I guess, in motion graphics, if you can say that now. Nowadays, like students just like hop into Octane and start rendering stuff out of cinema, and it's just a different world. We went to a few student showcases here in LA, and just to find like awesome summer interns or junior people, and it's just crazy, like the stuff that's in those reels now. It's like it blows my mind because their reels are, miles ahead of what we had back then. I think back then there was a much bigger focus on your story, your ideas, coming up with an actual storyboard where you're telling the whole thing. Whereas today it's more about like, oh, I saw this thing that a studio made and I thought it was visually cool, so I kind of did the same thing. But then you ask them like, why they did it, they're like, no, I just thought it was cool. But there wasn't a deeper meaning behind it. It wasn't like, this is a story I'm trying to tell. They're more focused on like a visual style.
So was your studies more around film animation or broadcast animation? Because how are you telling a story with a broadcast animation? When is it like, in my understanding, and I'm trying to get clarification on this, like,
right.
When I think of broadcast animation and see the samples of stuff you do, and you talk about the NBA Finals stuff, it's bumpers and intros and stuff like that. Was it different type of stuff that you were working on in school that they had you doing?
Yeah, so there were multiple classes. Like one was a time-based typography class, for example. So it kind of bridged the whole graphic design world with motion graphics, and we had to animate all these like shapes and letters and make fun projects like solely out of typography. Okay. So that was like one class, and another class was like title design, right? So we had to make all these like mock titles for a TV show or a movie, and everybody get the same movie. So everyone's title obviously looked different, and people had a different interpretation of how the story arc should kind of take place. And as far as like what I do today, when you talk about the big like sports packages and stuff, there's the story part only really happens, at least in my eyes. It only really happens in the very beginning when you talk about, here are some visual concepts, and this is like the idea behind it. A lot of times just through, production and multiple, client inputs, that idea can change like sometimes drastically, right? Where you had like tons of cool references at first, and like, you had something fleshed out, and you're like, yeah, this is it. And then just a month later, I mean, it's a full 180, and you're like, what happened to our like idea? But, sometimes you got to go with the flow too. And I always say, like, middle America, or like whoever's not in this, like, in the entertainment business or the motion graphics thing, they don't think about like how this stuff gets on TV. How many hours were invested on like concepting, or like they just want to see cool graphics and a fun game, right? They want to have an awesome experience. And I think at the end of the day, the goal is to keep the people in front of the TVs, and if anything can do that, like that's all you can ask for, really.
No, definitely. I mean, especially when it comes to sports, that's a huge element to enhance a product. You have a bad game or not so entertaining game, at least the sexy visuals can keep people engaged to an extent.
Right, for sure. Definitely.
So we can move on a little bit here, and I kind of want to sort of go progressively through your career and talk about your time at in New York City. Sorry, what was the studio called again? Boyka?
That was a Big Star.
Big Star, and then there's Troika in LA. So Big Star in New York City. And what were some of the projects you got to work on? Maybe one or two, and what was your roles on those? And what softwares were you using? Yeah,
so Big Star was it's basically it was one guy at the top, the owner, and then it was one producer, sometimes two, and then just a couple of artists, and I was one of them. And then so yeah, it was a very small team, and a lot of the work that we did at the time was documentary films, and we worked on Michael Moore movies, and there was a big what was the movie called about the financial crash, Inside Job. Yeah, ended up getting, I think it won like best documentary that year at the Oscars. So it was cool. Just working on something I never even thought of before. The documentary game is obviously way different from like sports graphics, where everything happens in like 3 seconds. Documentary stuff is very much like slow paced, and you gotta, if the narrative is about like some document they're talking about or whatever, you have to like show the document, you gotta highlight it, do all that stuff. So it's just a totally like different visual language. But a lot of it was all 2D After Effects. Did a lot of like fake After Effects 3D camera moves kind of stuff.
Right.
And then we started infusing more and more like 3D into our work too. I think the owner at the time, he kind of understood that I'm interested in 3D, and he tried to give me the chance to study up on that as much as possible and use it in projects. So yeah, it was tons of documentary film stuff, and then we did some car commercial things for Lexus. We did one, I think it was a big reveal spot there. They showed at like the LA Auto Show or something. It's for one of their concept cars, and it was a whole array of projects. I mean, we did stuff for Food Network. Talk about like just a full mixed bag of stuff. I was one time I was like animating recipes, and it was every day was different. Every week there was like a new project. And then the documentary stuff, it always just stuck around. Like the deadlines were never ending. They always tried to like get to one film festival, and then they're like, "Nah, we're not going to make that. Let's kick it to the next one." And then, yeah, we're going to make that one. So yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, but fun work.
All right. Well, I got a question about After Effects for you that I'm just kind of curious about as a After Effects user at whatever level I would be considered at. But plugins, like what point did you start using plugins, or do they come in? Is it something that I feel like each one there's a learning curve for each one, and if you can master that, there's a lot of things you can do with that. But After Effects itself is a very, very powerful tool without anything. So you kind of got to be strategic with which ones that you invest in and which ones you invest your time in. So interested to hear your take on that.
Yeah. So when we were in school, they didn't have any like third-party plugins on any of our machines. And at the time as a student, it was frustrating because all we heard about was like these awesome third-party plugins. And A, we didn't have the money to like buy licenses, and B, like those weren't our computers anyway. So, but then, once you get in the industry, they sit you down at a computer and all of a sudden you have like all the plugins in the world, and it's like a kid in a candy store. But the problem is you don't understand how to use these plugins yet, right? You don't have any experience with those. So it's definitely it's a learning curve. I think back then, a lot of plugins almost became like a visual style where you knew exactly what plugin they used for that. And I think it gets tricky at that point, because I'd rather use no plugin rather than like being super obvious what plugin I used. But yeah, as time went on, I think it just came down to me looking at a problem and then thinking how the plugin can help me get to my final point, but it's not the end all be all. Like I'm not 100% relying on this one thing. I think it's always about like putting your own spin on it, right? If let's say you use a plugin, I would use like 3 or 4 or 5 more adjustment layers above it or below it, just to make it less obvious that you have one.
Okay.
It's all like very fine details, but it definitely comes together at the end, and a lot of people will notice it too, and it will stand out. Yeah.
Cool. No, it's great input there. Great insight. I love it. We can kind of come back to your timeline here of your career, but as we're talking about After Effects, I'm curious is that kind of the main program you're using today?
Yeah, I'm still heavily using After Effects. It was definitely, there was a time when Cinema 4D, the whole 3D wave came in and everybody was doing 3D. I think we're now kind of turning the corner again and going back to a lot more two-dimensional stuff, which is great. I think especially for like typography, any sort of information, names, it just always looks better. It looks crisper in 2D, in my opinion. So yeah, After Effects definitely my top 2-3 programs I use. I'm mostly in After Effects, Photoshop, and Cinema 4D. Okay. But having worn a lot of hats, I guess, in all these years, I know sort of what the handoff is between the design phase and the animation phase. And I try to, when I design something these days, I try to make it as easy as possible for the animator who's going to take over this project.
Totally.
So I actually design everything. I'd say probably 90% I design in inside After Effects. So that way, if something gets approved, somebody picks my frames, then the handoff is super smooth, and all the animators are going to love you because they don't have to recreate it.
Yep.
And all the color layers, they're already in there. Whereas like if you bring in Photoshop stuff in After Effects, a lot of times it doesn't interpret right. And I just love After Effects as like an interface. I think it has, I don't know, for what I use it, again, for a lot of sports work, there's a lot of changes with, logos and re-rendering stuff out of Cinema 4D. After Effects does a great job, which is just bringing in passes, all these object buffers. And basically once you have your things set up in After Effects. You have your whole comp. You just drop in new passes and it just auto updates, right? Whereas in Photoshop that would take forever. So yeah, it's definitely my weapon of choice for sure.
Great. Let's see. Going back to your kind of timeline here, I guess. Going into Troika, when you came out to LA, was there any big projects that you got to work on here? I think you kind of started to mention some of those when you went through it originally, but what were your role in those projects?
Yeah, at Troika, it was, like I said, it was a much bigger company, so they had a lot more ranks and positions that they had to fill. At the time, I was a just all around creative designer animator, and then we had about 2 art directors in sports, the sports division, and then we had 1 main creative director for sports. But then there was 6 other creative directors doing other entertainment work there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was fortunate enough to kind of get there right around when SportsCenter happened. This was in 2011. And yeah, it was a massive production. I think it took Troika a year and a half to do the whole project. And then I was animating, designing wherever they needed help. I was still trying to figure out my position at the company. They still tried to figure out what I can do. What are my skill levels, and it was just being open. I think that's the biggest part, is being open to any sort of task. Some days are going to be fun, some are going to be less fun, but at the end of the day, we're pushing pixels for a living, which is just nuts. So it makes it easy to get up in the morning, and it could be a lot worse, right?
Yeah.
So I was doing a lot of After Effects stuff for SportsCenter. I kind of learned how to toolkit, setting up files for clients where they can swap out logos. It's huge in sports. I kind of learned all these tricks at Troika for sure. And they had a lot of rules how they did stuff. And they actually had one guy. He was their staff, and he only checked files. That's all he did. So we would set up the whole After Effects project, full toolkit for a bumper, let's say. And and he would QC the entire thing, and he did that for every job they went through that company.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very impressive.
Yeah, that's some tedious work right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he had a good eye for it, and also there's a bit of an engineering component that comes with it, just trying to make it monkey proof. We always say,
right.
But even that can sometimes backfire. Sometimes you can over toolkit as well, where there's you almost give them too many tools. But toolkitting was a big thing at Troika for sure.
Yeah, I'd imagine with deliverables like SportsCenter and stuff like that, there's thousands of things that they can plug in to a lot of that stuff. Can you talk about maybe, or just mention, you don't have to go into it, but just a couple of the deliverables? Because I'm curious for SportsCenter. I mean, you mentioned some of the stuff was on the sets, some of the stuff was, intros, outros, bumpers. What were a couple of those deliverables?
Yeah, I personally, I always enjoyed the we call them franchise front ends, and it's basically a custom animation that's happening within a show. So it's it's like a show segment. It'll be like Boomer's X Factor, or some funky little segment, and it's usually with a sponsor attached. I always like those animations because it was longer than just a second. It was a 5-second intro, and you could kind of go away from the overall look of SportsCenter.
A little more creative freedom with those.
Yeah, you can be more playful with it, do some funky stuff with 3D dynamics, and so I always enjoyed those deliverables. And then also just the whole open. I don't know if you remember back in the day, SportsCenter had the big
the gears,
big turbine. Yeah, exactly. It was just always I don't know. It was always crazy to watch it on TV. It's how is this? How is this a sports broadcast? But it was, at the time, it was so futuristic, and and a lot of people tried to copy it too. So I always liked the big opens, which they kind of went away. Now it's more like editorial teasers, and there's a lot more footage involved, which makes sense because it tells a bigger story. Especially SportsCenter is all about what happened that day, the top 10 and all that. So it makes sense to go more editorial. But top 10 was fun. Did a lot of exploration on like how we can bring in the numbers, and every number had to have its own treatment under this like big umbrella. It was good. We did tons of exploration. I mean, if you put all that, I don't know, if you put all that on air, I mean, it would take you like 10 years to run through everything. Like, it's crazy.
Wow.
The stuff that finally gets approved by the client, I mean, that's sometimes you're like hundreds of versions in. Like, it's crazy. Those are kind of like my favorite things for sure.
That's really cool. That's awesome. I mean, that's awesome for me to hear about, what all goes into that. That's just something that I think anybody who's interested in this content, that the show in particular, would be interested in SportsCenter and ESPN. So, something that I've, always wondered about. So cool to hear about it then.
Yeah.
What about any kind of, and we'll go bounce around to here a little bit, but in terms of getting into your career, your position into that field, are there any certificates or credentials that kind of help your progress in the field?
Speaking from my own experience, I mean, after leaving college, that was the last time I got a diploma of some sort.
Okay.
No one's ever asked me for my diploma, where did I go to school? I mean, sometimes it's more out of like just a bonding
Right.
Kind of question, but it's never helped me get into a studio because I had that piece of paper.
Right.
In my opinion, it was always down to, where have you been? What have you done? And also, who do you know, right? At the end of the day, you have to be liked by people. I mean, it's just a thing because you're around all these artists all day long, and you want to make sure that the vibe is right, and you don't want to have some, there's always the occasional person that they just don't fit in, right? Because maybe something happened in their private life and they brought it to work, and there's a lot of different factors. But no, I think college was essential to get the right foundation and stuff. But I think I'd be lying if I said that paper got me into all these studios. I don't think so. I think along the way, we picked up some awards. That can definitely get your name out there, and recognition is always nice. But again, I would never solely rely on just like, hey, just because I have this one trophy, it gets me X amount of work. It's all about just grinding and staying on it.
No, definitely. I'm just curious because there's like Avid certification, stuff like that. So just curious if there's anything in your world that's like that, because I don't know of anything. So
right,
that's kind of
it's funny. Like some of the people I've worked with, they're like high school dropouts, right? I mean, they never had a college education, and they're amazing designers. So yeah, it's people from all walks of life that come together, and I think at the end of the day, we rarely talk about like what we did for school, and when people graduated, it's just like you have different things in mind these days.
You could be 22 or 42. It's just a matter of what your output is, and what the product you're delivering is.
For sure.
Cool. Another question I got on here for you is, and you mentioned it kind of off the top, but the difference in graphic design and motion graphics, the stills versus motion. You said you've done both. Can you go a little more into when you decided to, and what spurred you into the decision of going into motion, and how people that are maybe in that motion design study right now or something, or have that knowledge base, can get into motion design? Yeah,
I mean, I think if you're into like I said, if you're into like 3D animation, like all the Disney stuff, things you would watch as a kid, all these feature films, and if you're into, let's say, good advertising, like traditional advertising, poster design, things of that nature, it's a great bridge to go into motion graphics because you get a bit of both. and they're both like equally vital, I'd say. I think the root obviously is still graphic design, because graphics design's been around for much longer than motion graphics. But yeah, I mean, I don't know really what swayed me to get into it, but I think it was just, at the time, it was just something new that I didn't know much about, and people didn't seem to know much about it either. And it just felt right to go into that field. There was also a graphic design building at our school. Every major kind of had its own building, and I just remember there being so many graphic design students as well, versus motion graphics was a much smaller class. And I was like, I think there's a better shot at the end of this. Coming out of school, there's going to be a little less competition, perhaps. Rather than going with like the graphic design route, or even like photography. So I think it's just an awesome like hybrid between animation and graphic design. I grew up with a lot of like Swiss graphic design, so it was a lot more traditional, a lot of typography stuff, obviously.
Right.
I think it was, part of it was like I didn't grow up with like awesome graphics on TV. Everything was a lot more like a lot more mellow, a lot more like sleek, and not too overpowering, where everything in the States is like just it's gotten better too, but it used to be just over the top every time, just like flares going off left and right. But yeah, as a young artist, like that's the kind of stuff you want to do. You just want to be in fun projects. So again, like things just kind of evolved as they, I guess, had to. Just kind of happened for a reason.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to figure out a little bit about you and your creative process here. Is there anything that you do in your personal life, or maybe when you step away from the computer, that can maybe help clear your mind or inspire creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I think as time goes on, you start to see beauty, and you find curiosity in a lot of different, areas in life. And I get a lot of like inspiration just going to like I was saying earlier, going to like live games, for example. I go to a ton of LAFC games here, and try to catch as many Laker games as possible. It's just sometimes I get inspired by the energy of the crowd, the whole show that's being put on. That's definitely stuff we translate into graphics. It's not always just like looking at other companies' work. Of course, you want to be sort of in touch with what's happening, but I think too often people just look at what the competition is doing, and then it all kind of starts looking the same.
Right.
After a while, and certainly with like, you got platforms like Pinterest and Behance. They're all like awesome networking tools as well, but everybody else is looking at that stuff too, so you just got to keep that in mind. But yeah, in my free time, I love to play golf. I go out to the desert a lot. It's a place where I can kind of just wind down and get rid of all the noise from LA, and I find beauty in like nature. There's awesome hikes you can do out there. It's just a different landscape too, which is always, I love the desert. It's just a fun place to be. I think a lot of times you also get inspired by things you don't really notice at first, but then at some point your brain is going to recall it whenever you need it. It's just stuff happening subconsciously. Like in New York, I remember I walked to work a lot. I lived in Manhattan, worked in Manhattan, and I pretty much took the same route every single day, but I swear, like not one day was like the same. It was always like every day I saw like a new thing, a new billboard, a crazy car that drove by, or an interesting person that crossed my path, and you just pick stuff up over time. And I think it comes down to age as well. Like what's important to me now wasn't probably not as important like 10 years ago. 10 years ago was a lot more like, oh yeah, what plugins are out right now? And it's like, it's a lot more, I I don't know, it's a lot more on the surface, everything. But now it's like you start to think a little deeper, and you have more meaningful conversations with friends. And so yeah, inspiration's everywhere, I think. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, I want to stay down that track of inspiration. I mean, to kind of juxtapose what you said a little bit about looking at other people, but what other people are you looking at? Because you got to be. I mean, just to be in the industry, you've got to see some things that wow you, and who are those, and where are you finding that?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of people I follow, they're definitely in my, like, I would say my friend circle,
Cool.
in my network. Especially in LA, it's hard to not have a friend that isn't in the entertainment business somehow. Yeah, definitely. Keep up with all my friends. They're sort of, I would say the majority are like in the same age as I am, and now a lot of them are moving into creating their own companies, and so it's been fun, like, watching them grow into these like new roles as creative directors. And so I definitely keep up with all these guys, and then also people from the past, like, what are they up to? Companies I used to work for, that company I mentioned earlier in New York, these guys are doing awesome work, and like there's still some of that documentary film work they do for sure, but they've branched out to, like, they've done stuff for Game of Thrones and
Sick.
Yeah. They did a lot of like teaser work for them, a lot of promos. It's just cool to see like some of these studios evolve, because back then, it was amazing to see what level they were at. But now it's like, it's even crazier, because there's so much more stuff that people expect. Clients ask for more and more every year, and the budgets get smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but it's just the level these days is just nuts, and it's hard to keep up with, who has a new project out. We used to go on this website called Motionographer. I don't know if you know it, but it was basically sort of like the website to go to when a studio would, post a new project. There was a guy that he actually went to our school, Justin Cohn. He kind of kept track of the whole industry, and he'd write articles about, how that project came about, and he would interview all the artists and creative directors that worked on that project. So back then, that was sort of like our dictionary of like what's happening out there. And Motionographer, I think they're still around, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know too many people that use it anymore. Now it's definitely shifted to like places like Behance, and
Right.
There's just a lot of cool like references and people I found over the years on Behance from like Russia and just places I've never been to. There's tons of talent in like Brazil. I have a bunch of Brazilian friends that live here and they work here, and they definitely have their own style and flair, and it's crazy when I look at my my website traffic too. I mean, there's so many like countries that are on that map that look at my site, even if it's just like a couple of seconds, but it's just crazy. I think what's interesting is like there's probably still a lot of talent out there that we just haven't heard of because they don't know how to really market themselves, or how to, they don't know how to get their name out there as well. But yeah, I meet new amazing people every year, honestly, at every level.
I mean,
Sure.
So one of the things I do like to do, this is provide kind of the listeners and people that are interested in this concept and in this area that you're working in, is some people that they can also follow and stuff like that. So are you able to name drop or give any specific accounts of your friends that you mentioned, whether it's their companies or their personal accounts that you like that are a good place to look?
Right. All right. Let's start the list. Oh man. My good friend Phil Guthrie, he went to school with me. We're in the same class. That's where we initially met. He started his creative studio a couple of years ago called Too Fresh, and they've been doing a lot of just inspiring work as of late. A lot of cool like sports packages, a lot of esports stuff. They got into like the whole gaming wave, doing packages for like esports tournaments and all that. Another guy, Fabian Garcon, he's a huge talent out of I think he's from Colombia. And he used to freelance with us at the studio I was at in what was it, Big Block? Yeah, that's right. And he just started a company called Shapes and Forms, also based in downtown LA. And they do a lot of cool stuff. They did some things for the San Francisco Giants. I think it was for their like New Jersey reveal or something like that. But yeah, just overall they do awesome like concept work too. They a lot of times they'll showcase like the behind the scenes stuff on Instagram, how they made certain things.
Oh,
I
sweet.
think that's interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there's some of the big companies like Buck. They've always been inspiring from day one. There's a bunch of studios like them that have been around for a long, long time, and they've also stayed relevant. I think that's like the hardest part in this industry is people come and go, companies come and go, but like staying relevant is extremely hard. And how you position yourself as an individual or a company, it's very tough. And there's always people out there trying to get you and trying to beat you too. So, but yeah, I still follow like a place like Troika that I worked at. Obviously, just to stay in touch with the whole sports industry, you got to look at the people that make the sports work, right? So, nowadays I see a lot on Instagram too. Just there's tons of like motion graphics accounts. There's like MD community on Instagram. Motion designers, that's a big one. Yeah, a lot of great reference everywhere. Yeah. That's kind of where
that's great stuff. No, I love that. You talk about
time too. I'm gonna get like some calls from people.
No, all good. We can, if you want to send me any, we can include those in the description after in the show notes and stuff like that. Because I love that stuff. I think that stuff's valuable. That's something that I'm just interested in, is just following the right people to get that creative inspiration and see who's doing it the best. You talk about staying relevant though, and I wanted to find out, just some of the things, some of the tricks, tips, hacks, whatever it may be that you feel like that you do to stay relevant.
or I think I'm relevant. I
don't
know.
That you think, yeah.
I think it's just being connected to your network, not, going to the meetups, going to industry parties. A lot of times, especially as time goes on, like as you get older, you have less and less time for all that stuff. But like every time I go to any of these industry parties, I always meet somebody, at least someone new, right? And you just never know what you're gonna get out of it too. And it's easy to say like, I'm just gonna stay at home, and I don't have time, or I'm not in the mood for it. But there's definitely always opportunity around the corner. You just don't know about it yet, right? And then I mean, creatively, I'm trying to I'm trying to keep up with some of these young guys coming in and girls, obviously. Just staying ahead with software. There's constantly new updates. Staying up to date with like plugins and things like that. I've definitely found my niche. I've even downgraded to just basically direction and design. I've gotten sort of rid of the animation component because I know people that are so much better at it, and I think that's one sort of valuable lesson too, is that there's always somebody better at something out there than what you do, and like trying to master every single piece of software, every single feature. It's not going to get you very far, because it's in real life you're not going to use all these features, but you'll find the 10 features that you're constantly using, and if you get really good at those, then you can definitely find sort of your rhythm and all that. But yeah, man, it's just, I don't know. Obviously you get some feedback on your work if you win a pitch, or if a studio keeps hiring you as a freelancer. I mean, those are all good things, and they obviously like you, or they like your work, or preferably both. And And yeah, like I said, like network. I mean, it's all on the connections. Having sort of like that peace of mind of like I can make a few calls and hopefully get a gig out of it. It's it's years in the making, and you just keep building on these relationships. But and yeah, try not to like burn any bridges, and because the work gets around quick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's universal advice for any profession.
Right, for sure.
But talking about as technology advances and programs and softwares keep updating and keep getting going further and further, what are some resources you use to stay up to date and to learn and to stay up with them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, nowadays there's so many tutorials on anything. I mean, on YouTube, on Vimeo. It used to be more on Vimeo because it was more of an artist community. And their search engine is kind of wacky, so I think YouTube's gotten more popular. But back in the day, it was always like Andrew Kramer. I was watching a lot of like Video Copilot stuff. He was like one of the guys back then, and then there was a lot of like lynda.com. I mean, I don't know how far back you want to throw it, but and then Grayscale Gorilla, he was a big guy coming out, and I think he was the first one to actually make these training videos where at the end of the video you actually created something that was fun to look at. Whereas I think a lot of training videos early on, it was just a dude like talking for an hour, and then at the end of it you had like a checkered cube. It's like, well, this doesn't look cool. But I learned how to do it, you know what I mean? So yeah, he was huge. But yeah, nowadays it's crazy. You just Google any question you have, and chances are somebody had that same question before you, and you'll find the answer within minutes. In Cinema 4D, the 3D program I use, there's actually a function where you can right click on any word inside the program, and it'll take you to the manual, and you can just read up on whatever that thing does. Which is super handy. I don't know why not more softwares are doing that, but yeah. And then I think the easiest way just to like learn something is by just asking. I mean, ask your peers, ask your coworkers, your friends. The answer is always out there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What about looking forward for you? What are some of your career aspirations? What do you see as is there a pinnacle for you?
Yeah, it's tough to say, because until this point, aside from having this sports passion, I haven't planned a single thing. It just all happened sort of organically, and of course I put in the work to get to this point, but I think the last couple of years have been interesting. Ever since I became like an independent contractor, I can look at some more some more things I want to do. I got involved with Apple as well. They hired me as one of their contractors for Apple TV, and it was just fun to work on a new sort of platform. Using the skills I have. The whole sports marketing background too, and kind of promoting sports content on this Apple TV platform. It's been really fun. And I think there's going to be a lot more of these like new channels as there were as time goes on. Like it used to be only TV, film, whereas now it's like people are watching that stuff everywhere. So it's going to be it's not even in my hands. I don't even know what's going to happen in 5 years. So I'm just kind of going with it, and I think the key is just to just be open to new opportunities, and people will reach out from a different industry. I've had that happen a few times, and at first you're like, why is this person hitting me up? But then once you talk to them, you learn a lot more about what they do and what value they see in yourself. I always say, like, never turn down like an interview or a phone call. Even if you're happy where you're at, it's just always good to like gain more perspective and to see what's out there. That's huge for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
So this is a question that I pose to all my guests, and it's just to kind of humanize all of us and make everyone, realize we're all going through stuff. Everybody's going through different stuff, but we're all going through stuff. What's your biggest struggle right now in your career?
Oh, career-wise?
Yeah.
I think it's having been in the industry for over 10 years now. Like I was saying earlier, you have a lot of friends now that started their own companies, and they started reaching out for help on certain design pitches and whatnot. And a lot of times, or sometimes it happens that like 2 or 3 of them reach out at the exact same time, and then you gotta like make that call of like, okay, I'm gonna roll with him, or I'm gonna roll with that guy this time, and they all talk to each other too. So it's a struggle to like keep everybody happy sometimes, because at heart I want to help everyone, but it's just not realistic. I'd say that's probably my biggest struggle. Other than that, like I was saying, I mean, pushing pixels for a living, it's awesome, and I still love it. So I don't, maybe I look past the struggles too that are struggles. I don't know. But I have a pretty like positive outlook on life, I guess. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
As we wind down here, you getting your chance kind of in front of the camera here instead of kind of behind the scenes. So I want to give you the opportunity to throw any shout outs out there. Anybody you want to show some love to? Yeah,
I mean, definitely to you, first of all. I mean, this is the first time somebody hit me up for like a little podcast thing, and it's awesome. Again, I didn't know you until like a few weeks ago, just exciting to see where you take the show, and maybe we'll work together at some point in the future. You never know. And then just everybody else that just helped me on the way here. People I met 10 years ago, people I met a couple months ago. It's some people they're gonna grow closer to you, and some you only meet once, but. Just shout out to, the homies know, they know who they are.
There you go.
The companies know too. But just too many people to mention. But thanks to everybody that helped me out, and obviously my family too. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you've given like just an hour's worth of like incredible advice throughout this whole time, but is there any last bit of advice that you want to give, you want to leave?
Oh man, just stay hungry. Whenever you get tired of doing something, make sure you get out of it as fast as possible. Don't wait around and kind of cope with it and be like, I can do this for another year. You should think about doing something else as soon as that happens, because it is scary. I've had it a few times on just like random projects, and I think as an artist, it's the toughest feeling to like just kind of be lost and out of inspiration and all that. But just find that next thing to hold on to, and just keep moving. Yeah.
Cool. And then I've gotten the privilege of seeing some of your incredible work that you shared with me. But where can people follow you? Where can people see your stuff?
Yeah, website is bossmode.tv, and all my social links are on there. My Behance profile. As well as my Instagram. Instagram is at Boss Mode Studios, and that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
That's it, man. That's all I got.
Cool. This has been a privilege. This has been great. Definitely a new space for me, but really, really grateful that I got to talk to you, and you gave some incredible insight there to an industry that I knew very little about. So this was awesome.
Awesome, man. Well, glad I could join you.
Thank you for listening to the motion design episode of the Shooting to Score podcast with Philipp Bichsel. As with every guest, I encourage you to follow him on social and check out all the incredible resources he mentioned. You can find all those in the show notes located at sportsbusinessclassroom.com/shooting to score. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date with the latest releases from Shooting to Score, subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, and check out our social channels on Instagram and Twitter. A big thanks to Hall Pass Media and Sports Business Classroom for making this all possible, and a special thank you to you, the listener, for taking the time to tune in today. We'll be back next week with another brand new episode of Shooting to Score.